Sorry, Jordan. Anyway, we have been doing a little series on and off called Been Fully Loaded. And I want to touch on something today that's probably one of my favorite topics for speaking on. And it's something I've spoken on before, but I just want to remind us of the importance of understanding this. And so we've been talking about how we in Northern Ireland, we love to be fully loaded. We love our cars fully loaded. We love our food fully loaded. You can go on to the next slide. If we're getting pizza, we just don't like to get a tomato pizza. We like just to get whatever there is in the menu, we like to get it on it. If we like get a burger, we just don't want to get a burger. We want a double burger with bacon and cheese and an onion ring for some reason, and fried onions and mayo, and it has to be dripping off your elbow. Is that just me? Oh, sorry, that's just me. Okay. But you know what I mean? We love stuff that's fully loaded. And the Bible tells us that God is a God who fully loads us. It says daily he loads us with benefits, the benefits of our salvation. And so here's some of the things we looked at. We're not going to go into them, but we looked at we're loaded with the name of Jesus. That is a powerful thing. He has given us his name in testimony and in authority. We're loaded with the presence of God. His presence is with us all the time. He's loaded us with faith. He's loaded us with hope. He's loaded us with God's love. We looked at the different words that the Bible uses for love, and we saw that God gives us a special love that only he can release to us. We're loaded with the message of the gospel. We're loaded with ministry, whether we realize it or not. If we know the Lord, we're loaded with ministry. We're loaded with light, and that was the one we looked at the last time. And we saw that sometimes the light is a little bit dimmer because some of these things get in the way. And Johnny last week was talking about getting out of our caves. And sometimes these are things that can be our caves. We can be in the cave of fear, the cave of sin, or cave of lack of knowledge, or pride, or hurts, or unforgiveness. And so these things block the light. And so we finished off last time by saying, what's your light blocker? And if we know that something's blocking the light as we shine, well then let's release it. Let's get rid of it. But today we're going to talk about being loaded with purpose. Because this is what keeps you young. This is what keeps you fit. This is what gets you up in the morning. This is what makes you, when you're almost 60, feel like a 24-year-old. That's what I'm thinking, trade Mary in for a 24-year-old. No, that's not what I meant. Just in case, I just thought some of you were thinking that, but no, I feel like a 24-year-old, just to clarify that, just in case I get put in the spare room. Anyway, loaded with purpose. And so purpose, this is what the dictionary said about purpose. Purpose is the reason for which something is done. I love the dictionary because the dictionary helps us understand stuff. It's the purpose for which something is done. Now, I'm one of those people who's really annoying. Can I get an amen? Because I want to know how stuff's done. I just don't want to know that it's done, but I want to know how it's done. I want to know what the reason for doing something that way is. So people do stuff all the time. So I go to somewhere and then they'll say, well, we'll have to do X, Y, Z. But I said, but why do we have to do it that way? Because you find people are doing things because they've always done it that way. That's totally not relevant to where they started doing it 10 years ago. So I always want to know the question. So I continually get in my life, nobody ever asked me that. Every week in life, somebody says to me, nobody ever asked me that question before. And I find that amazing that people are so gullible and so just willing to take the status quo and not ask, well, why are you doing it like that? Especially if it's something that doesn't seem to make sense. Anybody ever, is that just me, is it? Have you ever been in a situation where somebody's doing something, why on earth are they doing that? That makes no sense at all. And then when you ask them, you think, oh, it doesn't make any sense. But then sometimes they explain to you and say, now I understand why they do it that way. So sometimes there's a reason for that. Other times there's not. So the reason why something is done, the reason why something is created. Wow, we're going to look a little bit more about that this morning. Things are created with a purpose and for a purpose, isn't that right? We don't go around thinking like that generally. We just use the stuff, but we don't think somebody had to come up with the idea of this. Or it's the reason for which something exists. That's quite scary, actually, when you put it into a Christian context. Is there a reason for me to exist? Is there a reason for you to exist? Because if there's not, well, God might as well just beam us up, Scotty. And so that's what purpose is. Mark Twain said this, the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I've said that so many times from this platform, but it doesn't get any less true. And so the day we're born is a very important day, but the day that we find out why is an amazing day in our lives because it changes our whole perspective in life. And so purpose is about finding and fulfilling our creation mandate. Now that sounds very deep and philosophical and theological, but it's not really. It's about finding, we could find our purpose, but if we don't fulfill it, that would be very frustrating, wouldn't it? There's lots of people have an inkling. There's lots of people who think they've found what their purpose is, but they're not fulfilling it. That is a very awkward, difficult, discouraging place to be. And some of you, I believe, may be there today. And so hopefully today's message will help you maybe move to the next stage. So purpose is about finding and fulfilling our creation mandate. Now, there's a creation mandate that was given to Adam and Eve. We read in Genesis, God said, here's the reason I put you in there, to multiply, be fruitful, to have dominion. He gave them some instruction. But I'm not particularly talking about that creation mandate. I'm talking about my personal creation mandate. Do you know you're a creation? Or are you one of those people that came from a monkey? Which came from a fish, which came from an amoeba, which came from a speck of dust? Put your hand up if you are. No, maybe not. If you want to know if you came from a monkey, when you go home, stand in front of the mirror and let your hands hang. And if they're touching the ground, you came from a monkey. But we each have a creation mandate. Listen to what Psalm 139 says. And we read this generally when we're doing dedication services. And we're going to have a dedication service coming up shortly. We've had two or three, probably new babies in the church. And we love dedication services. But here's what David said in Psalm 139. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made, bit by bit. You know, when you look at those photographs, we've recently had a grandchild, as you know. When you look at those scans, they're amazing, aren't they? But you see, you know, the parents come and they say, look at the scan. You think, well, am I supposed to be seeing something here? And you think, oh, yes, isn't it lovely? Look at his head. No, that's his feet. But bit by bit. But then maybe a month later, they come with another scan. And you think, all right, I think I can see something. Then maybe a month later or 6 weeks later, they come and you think, wow, that's unbelievable. Look at those little toes and feet and the head. And then when you get closer to the time, you can see, wow, bit by bit, God has knit together that little baby, that creation. It's an amazing thing. And so I don't want to sound like a doting grandfather, but that's just the truth, isn't it? Yes, just add the grandfather, but... John, I was nice and didn't say you're the one who turned up yesterday for the... Don't tell me any secrets. Anyway. You know exactly how I was made, bit by bit, how I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watch me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. This is the thing I love about God. You see, we live in time. God created time as a gift for us as human beings, but God doesn't live in time. He lives outside of time. He's the Alpha and the Omega at the same time. He's the beginning and the end and everything in between at the same time. So as far as God's concerned, He knows the end of our story before it even started, before the foundation of the world. This is what this little passage is telling us. Like an open book, you watch me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. The days of my life all prepared before I'd even lived one day. your thoughts. Now, I've added this plans and purposes because when you study the word thoughts, it's about God's good thoughts towards us. It's about his plans, his purposes towards us. They're not just random thoughts. What does the Bible say? God says he knows the plans that he has for us, the purposes. They're for good and not for evil. So the days of my life were prepared before I'd even lived one day. Your thoughts, your plans and purposes, how rare, how beautiful. God, I never comprehend them all. But we do need to comprehend some of them, don't we? We do need to, the greatness of God, the things that God has planned for us would blow our minds. But let's start with something. Let's begin to start with them. God, I never comprehend them all. I couldn't even begin to count them or count them all. And so here's the book. This is more a business image, but here's the book of our life that's already been written. Our work, our trade, what we're going to do, all these things. Our book, the book of God's book of our life is already, it's a story that's already been written. It's a story that's already been told. The key for us is to get on the same page that God's on at the same time, isn't it? And I've said this before, I don't want to be on page 30 if God's on page 130. I don't want to be on page 130 if God's on page 30. This is why he leads us. This is why he guides us. This is why there's seasons. Just as there's chapters in a book, there's seasons in life. A book would be very hard to read if it had no chapters in it, wouldn't it? It'd be very hard to read if it had no punctuation in it. And so sometimes our lives are punctuated by circumstances, they're punctuated by moments, they're punctuated by chapters and seasons. And sometimes we say this, I feel as if that chapter of my life is coming to an end and I'm stepping into a new chapter. We should be thinking like that, because if we don't use that phraseology or even think like that, we're just going to keep on doing the same thing and get to the end of our lives and say, well, what was that all about? You see, this is why God uses these examples of books and the story of he uses seasons. But a book, particularly in this case, has, as I say, has chapters. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, as do our lives. And so God has that planned out. God's book is a book of purpose. It says it's saying he has a book of purpose for our lives. It's not just some random life. Here we are, we're born, get on with it. No, God has purposes and purpose. Maybe not what, for some, they find purpose early on and that purpose carries them all through their lives. For others, they find purpose for a season as they're faithful in that purpose. What does the Bible say? If you're faithful over a little, or if you're faithful over a little purpose, God will make you master over much. And so sometimes the purposes of our lives start small, and then as we're faithful in that area of purpose, then God begins to give us larger areas of purpose. And sometimes we when we look back in our lives, we think, wow, how did I get from there to here? Well, it's because we were faithful in that page, we were faithful in that chapter, we were faithful in that season, and then God was able to move us on to the next season of purpose in our lives. But of course, that creates all sorts of questions. Well, who's this purpose going to be with? What is my purpose? Where am I going to do it? When is it going to be? Why this purpose for me, Lord? How is it going to be achieved? We've got questions that we need answers to. Isn't that right? And for some, when I talk to people, I find that some people have found it very easy to find their purpose, and other people have found it very difficult to find their purpose. And so part of our job as leaders and part of our jobs as fellowshipping together is to help each other, to encourage each other to find our God-given purpose. And so it's great. I love to be praying for someone like Fal, as we're praying for him today. At an early age, Fal is saying, this is what I believe God's purpose is over my life and for my life. This is why I believe I was created to work with youth and with young children and with children. And so that may, as he develops in that may develop into something greater and bigger. But it's wonderful in this season of his life that he's been led by purpose, not by some random good idea. And so, when an inventor creates something, he has purpose in mind. Now, understand that Albert Einstein wasn't really an inventor, and it's just in case there's any clever people here, which I don't think there is, so I'm safe enough ground. But in the true sense of the word, Albert Einstein wasn't a creator. He was a thinker and a philosopher that caused inventors to think differently. And then lots of people invented lots of things because he taught them a new way of thinking. So he didn't invent the telephone or the light bulb or this mic, but he was a father of invention in that sense. And so when an inventor creates something, he has purpose in mind. Isn't that right? I haven't read this book, but I would love to read this book, 1001 Inventions That Changed the World. So, I think one of the greatest inventions is a chair. Who invented the chair? Well, I don't know what his name was, but I know this. He was someone who was fed up sitting on the floor. Isn't that right? So before somebody invented the chair, they were looking for a platform. Because before that, they were sitting on the floor. Oh, I hope I can get up again. Some cultures still sit on the floor. They seem to enjoy it, or else they can't afford to buy chairs. But someone who's got a backache. But whoever invented the chair didn't invent a chair and then say, I wonder what we could do with that. No, they thought, I hate sitting on the floor. I need to have a more comfortable sitting position. What could I invent that would make my life more comfortable if I wanted to sit down? Isn't that right? The chair is a chair of purpose. It had thinking behind it. It wasn't just some random thing that appeared, boop, and all of a sudden there was a chair, or somebody had too much wood left over from their man's shed. I thought, nailed them together and thought, wow, I wonder what I could do with that. No, it had purpose, it had thinking, it had intelligence behind it. You see, the person who invented the printing press was fed up having to copy everything by a feather and ink and a piece. Imagine, we are so blessed, and I would hate to have lived before the printing press, or before Wi-Fi, or before. So here was somebody, lots of people get accredited for inventing these things, but usually when you read the history of it, there's 2 or 3 people who were thinking the same thing, and then the person who had the money to put it up and patent it, or the person who usually gets the credit. But anyway, somebody thought, this is a laborious job. All these monks, they're sitting in all these monasteries, writing all these books and filling all this stuff. It could take 2 years to write. You know, even the Bible, you think of the Bible, how painstakingly the Bible was written. Somebody thought, we need to get literature out to a mass audience. And they come up with this. This was the start of the modern technology that we had, but the principles of this are because of someone, because there was a need, because there was a purpose that they wanted to fulfill. The light bulb. The person who invented the light bulb was fed up sitting in the dark, was fed up having to go and buy 4 candles, was fed up having to, thankfully it doesn't happen very often, but you know the way when your electricity goes out, and then you think, does everybody know where their candles are? You know where your 4 candles are? But you're running looking for, so you think the electric's gone, I need to go and get those candles, and I was planning to do such and such and such a thing, and you think, well, sure, I'll just watch the TV, I'll get caught up with it. For goodness sake. But the person who invented the light bulb was just fed up with the dark. And so they put a lot of effort into inventing that. We probably have read the story. The person who invented the motor car was tired of going along on a horse. His backside was sore. He thought, I need a more comfortable form of transport. I need something that can carry my family. I'm fed up having all these horses pooing all over the place. I want something that'll get me from A to B 4 times the speed in a bit of comfort, and it can carry luggage and all this sort of stuff. And so there was purpose behind the motor car. The person who invented the airplane, they thought, I want to be able to travel overseas or on land or over land quicker than taking a boat or using a train or whatever. There was always purpose in the invention. Who remembers telephones like this? It's scary, isn't it? I'm only a young man, and I can remember telephones like this. Our young people think, what is that? I would, Lee and Emma, that's a telephone. That's what a telephone used to be like. So unbelievable. And when you got one of these in the early days, not right, you thought you were elected. In fact, I remember my grandmother lived in a little area where there was maybe about 50 houses, and one person had a telephone, and then you went to that person's house and you gave them a couple of old D to use their telephone. And anyway, but that person who invented the telephone wanted to be able to talk to people, whether it's in commerce or to their friends, without actually physically having to be there with them. What a great invention, isn't it? Like, imagine a world without a light bulb, without a chair, without a car, without an airplane, without a telephone. Now, some of you would just go out and top yourself if you had no telephones, even for a day. You're probably not allowed to say that in church, but anyway. But you just would struggle if you didn't have a telephone. But somebody had to invent that. Penicillin. Alexander Fleming. What an amazing invention, if that's the right word for it, or discovery. Penicillin's maybe not an invention, it's more a discovery. But these people had to have a passion. They had to have a desire to see change. Every one of these things that were created or invented was because there was a desire to see something changed or improved or an obstacle overcome. Isn't that right? The first TV. Isn't that great? The TV is not an old invention. The TV is only celebrating its 90th anniversary this year. Isn't that amazing? 90 years. Anybody ever see a TV? Pauline, had you a TV like that? You're not watching the TV, you're watching me. I'm outside of your circle of trust. Anyway, TVs are unbelievable now. My wife won't let me buy a bigger TV, but that's just one of those things. I'm going to have to suck it up. Unless she's planning to buy me a 65-inch TV for my 60th birthday. No. First computer. Somebody thought we need to collect this data. We need to, all these books. These were bigger than the books almost. Unbelievable. And so this was the first computer where we were able to collate and gather information. But again, it was created, it was invented because someone wanted to, there was a purpose. Someone wanted to collate and gather information. It's hard to believe now when you look at something you can hold in your hand that does everything. I remember Mary and I visited NASA a few years ago, and they were saying that the technology that was in the old Nokia, I remember the Nokia flip phones. They were very basic phones that came out 20 years ago, before smartphones came out. Does anybody remember when there was no smartphones? And so they were saying the technology that was in the Nokia, whatever number it was more than was in the whole schedule for landing on the moon. So they basically landed on the moon with 2 cups and a piece of string and an elastic band. And so when you think of the technology they have now, and we have now, it's unbelievable. The internet has changed our lives. I was just thinking about this yesterday as I was preparing this message. When I used to prepare a message, and maybe like many of you preachers here, I had a concordance, and I had a Strong's, and I had like 6 versions of the Bible, and I had all these books spread out to help me study. Well, now you can just find all that information online. You don't need to be able to speak Greek or Hebrew, which would be handy if you can. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn it, but you can find it out at the touch of a button. We basically can. So what's the first thing you do now if you don't know something? You Google it. And so look at the progression of things. Look at just the journey of mankind, even in inventions and creations. And so those of us who are used to these things now, we find, wow, how would you live life without these things? So then bring it back to ourselves. if all these things were created with intention, if all these things were created with purpose, if all these things were created to meet a need, if all these things were created to answer a problem, and God's the great creator, and we're his invention or his creation, we need to ask ourselves some questions, because we're more important than any of these things. See, heaven and earth will pass away, and there'll be no more interweb, or smartphones, or cars, or because we'll not need any of those things. And so here's some questions we need to ask ourselves. Why was I born? Now, I want to emphasize the I, because according to the biological research that I have done on Google, I used to have a white coat, and I was deciding whether to be a doctor or what my career was going to be, but then I decided to become a chip man because I thought it was less training. But anyway, why was I born? So I don't have a lot of expertise in biological research, but I can look up Google. And so apparently at conception, at up to 500 million sperm can be released, and from 100 million to 500 million sperm can be released to fertilize an egg. Say an average of 250 million. So you had a 250 million chance to 1 to be created. That's mind-blowing. Why was I born? Why was not one of the other sperm, why did it not fertilize that egg? That's a mind-blowing. That's enough to keep us pondering for the rest of our lives, if we were to take time to think about that, because that makes us very, very special people. That makes us winners before we ever start. Before we're ever born, we're a winner, because we bit off, as we say in Northern Ireland, whatever the 250 million minus 1 is to get to the winning point. That's an amazing thing. Why was I born? Why did God create me as me? Now, I understand that our environment affects what we become and who we become. I understand all that. But there are certain traits when you look at a newborn baby. We look at John, we look at the little babies that have been born, you look at the babies born in your family, you can already see the traits that they have, can't you? You can see their little temper tantrums, you can see their personality, even at a very young age. Why did God create me as me? He must have had a purpose for that. What is my God-given shape? So you have a teapot. Well, a teapot has a particular shape to it. Isn't that right? It can be used for other things. A teapot loves pouring tea. But you could pour water out of a teapot. You could pour milk out of a teapot. You could pour coffee out of a teapot. You could pour weed killer out of a teapot. You could tie 10 teapots with string. Here's an idea for you creative types. You could tie 10 teapots by the handle with string and put them outside their door, and there could be wind chimes. See how creative I am? You're laughing. What's wrong with that? Would that work, or would it not? If they were stainless steel, they would have to be stainless steel. Otherwise, if they're clay, they would break. But you could use them for that. Here's the scary thing. That's what's happening to some of us. Some of us were created as a teapot to pour tea, and we're hanging outside the front door with 10 other people that are misplaced being a wind chime. That sounded stupid, but there was a point. What's my God-given shape? What am I good at? Sometimes when we're looking for purpose, we're looking for something that's mystical and magical and way out there. What are you good at? Because God is not so stupid that he wouldn't call you and give you a purpose and then not have you good at that particular thing. He would anoint you, he'd give you the gifts, the talent to do that. What makes me angry, happy, or sad? What is our passion? What's the things that stir us? What stirs me up? We look at Jesus. Jesus got angry, righteous anger. Jesus wept, the Bible said. Jesus was joyful. He was happy when he was in certain situations. So what makes us angry? Is there things that make us angry because of the injustice? What stirs me up? Who am I to help? That's a good question, because everything that was created was to help someone or some situation or to answer a problem. How can I do it? Well, start small. Start pushing some doors. When will this happen? These are all questions that are good to ask. Purpose. We need to have values. We need to have passions. We need to have skill and expertise with talents. Bring all these things together. Found this on the internet. So for some of us, we're maybe not paid for doing our passion, but for others, we maybe are for our purpose. And so something we're good at, something that's a passion, something we love doing, something that's a mission for us. It could be our profession, or it could just be a vocation. You don't have to be paid to do a vocation. The world needs it. The world needs you and I. That's why God created us. There's a world out there that's hurting that needs you and I. Maybe you're paid for it. It may be your profession, and that's fine, but it's not totally necessary. Look at David. David said, is there not a cause when he stood before the Goliath? He said, is there not a cause here? We need to shake ourselves up. Moses was stirred up for social injustice. He saw his Hebrew brothers being oppressed, and so he killed a couple of the guys. I'm not advising that you do that, but he killed a couple of the soldiers that were beating them up. For this purpose, the Bible says, Christ was revealed that he might destroy the works of the enemy. For some people, it may be pro-life, the rights of the unborn. For other people, your cause may be human trafficking. It may be 100. There's many, many purposes out there. Without purpose that is bigger than yourself, you're more likely to serve only yourself. You see, when we discover our purpose, we'll also discover servanthood. And so you can't discover your purpose without aligning it to servanthood. And it's actually easier to find your purpose by starting to serve than it is to try and find your purpose and then think, I'll serve it. If we will begin to serve, then we'll find purpose much easier. It's a bit like steering a moving car. It's much easier when it's moving. You say, well, I'm too busy. To everything there is a season and a time. To every purpose under heaven, there's time to do it. We can all make excuses. We're all busy. We can all say, I'm too busy. But the Bible says there's time for every purpose, everything God has called you to do. You might say, I'm too old. How do you know it's not too late for God to use you? It's very simple. You're still here. Just as we finish, these may be too hard to see, but I'll read them to you. Mother Teresa was a modern example of someone who discovered purpose. And we all can't be Mother Teresa's. I understand that. We all can't go and help the poor in Calcutta. Maybe the band will come just as I read these last couple of things. Listen to what Mother Teresa said. You see, it's not even so much of what she said. This will give you an insight into the mindset of a person who's discovered their purpose. This will give you an understanding of the mindset of someone who knows how to find purpose and what their purpose is. People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you're kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. She also said this. This is the mindset of someone who understands purpose. Life is an opportunity. Benefit from it. Life is beauty. Admire it. Life is a dream. Realize it. Life is a challenge. Meet it. Life is a duty. Complete it. Life is a game. Play it. Life is a promise. Fulfill it. Life is sorrow. Overcome it. Life is a song. Sing it. Life is a struggle. Accept it. Life is a tragedy. Confront it. Life is an adventure. Dare it. Life is luck. Make it. Life is too precious. Do not destroy it. Life is life. Fight for it. Each one of us are created with a God-given purpose. A life of purpose. We're going to have to fight for it. We're going to have to fight to discover it. We're going to have to serve to discover it. This message today is maybe a slightly different message. I believe it's something we need to take away and ponder on over the week. We need to ask God some of the questions that we had up there. Why did you create me as me? What am I to do? What's my passion? What am I good at? All questions that will help us understand what our purpose is. Let's stand together. Let's worship. Let's talk to the Lord. Let's allow Him